I am away camping this week, but I still wanted to release an episode. It is a case I have been drawn to because it is local to me, and yet, except for family members, seems to have been largely forgotten about. Next to nothing has been written about Tony Whittaker in the last 30 years. Her name rarely features in lists of missing persons cases, and her story is seldom mentioned as a possible unsolved murder. There are many perplexing elements to this mystery, and Detective Alan Watkins, who played a lead role in the investigation, called it one of the most puzzling cases he had ever dealt with. Newport is a city situated near the Bristol Channel, a strip of water separating South Wales and the west of England. It is located approximately 12 miles, 20 kilometres northeast of Cardiff, the capital city of Wales. At the time of the events I'm about to narrate, Newport was still classified as a town, only achieving city status in 2002 to mark Queen Elizabeth II's Golden Jubilee. 34-year-old Stephanie Rose Whittaker, known as Stevie or Steve by friends and family, was married to Tony, aged 37, a housing association manager. By the spring of 1990, the couple had been married 15 years and were raising 3 children together, 2 boys and a girl, aged 12, 9 and just 18 months. The family lived on Llanthwy Road, to the west of Newport town centre. As a young woman, Stephanie had graduated from Bristol University with a psychology degree before working for Gwent Health Authority in a psychiatric hospital. Before the birth of her 3rd child, Stephanie had been working as a home advisor for people with mental disabilities. She had also recently completed a course in counselling and communication at the Alta Inn college site in Newport. When her youngest son was born, she gave up work as she wanted to be there for him and didn't want to miss out on his early years. The South Wales Echo describes Stephanie as a loving and well-loved person. Friends she met on her counselling course light-heartedly referred to her as Earth Mother because of her unwavering dedication to her 3 children. This steadfast commitment to her children even saw Stephanie enjoy making them clothes. The Wales on Sunday newspaper added that Stephanie had a down-to-earth, stable personality, though she was someone who expressed how she felt. Stephanie was someone who did not hide her feelings away, but wore them on her sleeve. Her husband Tony described Stephanie in an interview with the latter newspaper as fiercely honest. By all accounts and reports, the couple had a good relationship. Friends and family indicated that Stephanie was happy in her marriage. As Easter 1990 was approaching, the Whittakers were looking forward to going away on holiday to West Wales during the school break. For now, though, their usual, bustling weekly routine was in full swing. Friday, March 23rd, 1990, had been a normal day for the busy mum. In fact, the week as a whole had been full on. Just the day before, both parents had organised a party at a local pizza restaurant to celebrate their eldest son's 12th birthday. However, Friday evenings were Stephanie's opportunity to kick back and relax. It was a regular occurrence for her to go out with friends at the end of the working week. That evening, Stephanie made arrangements to meet her friends at 8:30 p.m. outside the St John's Ambulance Hall in Caxton Place, in the centre of Newport. The Spiritualist Church met there on Friday evenings, and Stephanie would sometimes attend meetings with friends before going out for 1 or 2 drinks. In terms of her attendance at the Spiritualist Church, Tony later told newspapers that it was just something his wife was interested in, intimating that she did not take it too seriously. From my research, it's unclear whether Stephanie was due to attend a meeting that evening and then go out for drinks, or just go out for drinks. The Western Daily Press did report on March 31st, 1990, that Stephanie was going with friends to a prayer meeting at the Spiritualist Church. As Stephanie was rushing around the house, getting ready to go out, she paused to telephone her friend to say she was running a bit late. This was long before mobile phones, so Stephanie called her friend's landline. The friend's husband answered the phone and told Stephanie that as it happened, his wife had already left for the rendezvous point. At around 8:25 p.m, just as she was about to exit the house, Stephanie called to her husband, "I'm off now, see you later." She then left the house in Llanthuri Road and headed on foot to Caxton Place in Newport town centre. She was wearing a blue and white pinstripe shirt, navy blue corduroy trousers, a 3/4 length navy blue wax jacket by the brand Barber. They were very fashionable at the time, and black ankle boots. The route, which meandered downhill, was well lit and busy, especially on a Friday evening. Stephanie would have headed down Llanthuri Road towards the Civic Centre before taking a right towards Caxton Place. It should have taken well under 10 minutes to walk. Stephanie never met up with her friends that night. Her husband Tony was at home, oblivious to this fact. Hours passed. It wasn't unusual for Stephanie to go to a friend's house for a coffee after an evening in the pub. So as time ticked on, Tony assumed that this is what had delayed Stephanie's return. At midnight, he retired to bed, concerned that his wife had not arrived home, but at a loss as to what to do. At 3 a.m, Tony woke up and, to his consternation, realised that Stephanie was not lying in the bed next to him. She had failed to return from her evening excursion. He paced around the house, debating what to do. In all the years they had been married, nothing like this had ever happened before. At 5 a.m, Tony telephoned one of the friends Stephanie had been due to go out with that evening. They told him Stephanie had not turned up at the expected time, and their group had not seen her all evening. The friends assumed that something had cropped up at the last minute, which had forced Stephanie to change her plans. Again, this was long before mobile phones, so they couldn't send her a quick message to ask where she was. After receiving this gut-wrenching news, Tony contacted the police to report his wife missing. Persons Unknown is a true crime podcast dedicated to unsolved murders and missing persons cases from all over the world. I'm John. I live in Wales, UK, and I research, write and produce this podcast. New episodes are released every other Monday. If you'd like to become a supporter of the podcast, please see the link in the show notes. For as little as the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can help to ensure these historical and lesser-known cases from around the world are aired and gain exposure. The show notes are also where to find social media details, information about the sources used for each case, and transcripts for all the episodes. If you enjoy the podcast, please consider leaving a review on your app. They make a real difference, and I love reading them. Finally, you can help others hear about Persons Unknown by sharing and recommending on social media. Thank you so much for listening. Now back to this week's episode. Over the next week, Stephanie's husband Tony made several appeals through local media for his wife to make contact or for members of the public to come forward with any pertinent information. Stephanie was described as 5 foot, or 152 centimetres, with a medium build and fair complexion. She had blue eyes with shoulder-length hair. In the photographs I've seen, it is blonde in colour. Gwent police also appealed to Stephanie directly, promising she could speak with them in confidence. They just needed to be informed she was safe. Husband Tony reiterated this sentiment, saying he just wanted to know she was okay. However, Gwent police were disappointed by the relatively poor response by the public to these pleas. In the first 7 days after Stephanie went missing, the incident room set up at Newport Central Police Station received less than 30 phone calls. This was a source of concern for Detective Superintendent Wilf Hill, who at that stage was in command of the search for Stephanie. He believed the disappearance was highly suspicious. The local area was searched thoroughly, including the River Usk, which runs through the centre of Newport, but with no results. Stephanie had just vanished, seemingly without a trace. Police inquiries with family and friends left no indication that anything had been at odds in Stephanie's life. The 34-year-old had no history of depression or any mental illness. Not long before her disappearance, the Wales on Sunday reported that Stephanie had told her mother, quote, "I've never been so happy." A couple who were neighbours of Stephanie told the Western Daily Press how worried they were for her and said they didn't want to dwell on some of the awful possibilities. They added that Stephanie lived for her kids and was always playing with her youngest son in the garden. Indeed, all who knew Stephanie said she would never choose to leave her family of her own volition. Everyone attested to the fact that she loved her children, and that love was her motivation for everything she did. With all this in mind, police did initially think Stephanie had been abducted. In an attempt to find potential witnesses and to help jog people's memories, a reconstruction was held of Stephanie's last known movements. Police civilian clerk Helen Cook played the role of Stephanie, and police officers lined the route and spoke to people all along the way. They were keen to trace anyone who travelled the route on Friday evening. Even if people had not seen anything, police urged them to come forward. Their information would still be useful in trying to piece together what had happened along the relatively small stretch of road. Shortly after Stephanie went missing, a handbag was found on a pavement close to a pub near or on Caxton Place. It contained makeup and was first thought to belong to Stephanie. This was soon proved to be a false assumption. Tony confirmed that his wife had left the house without a handbag. She had also not taken her bank cards or any cash, apart from a little loose change, estimated to have been no more than £2 or £3. It was also confirmed Stephanie took no extra clothing, and all her personal documents, including her passport, were found in the house. This evidence suggested that Stephanie's disappearance had not been premeditated. Having said all this, police inquiries failed to produce any sightings of an abduction. The route she would have walked had been very busy that evening, but no one had seen anything untoward. Whatever had happened to Stephanie, or whatever Stephanie had done, had not drawn any attention from passers-by. After the publicity concerning the reconstruction of Stephanie's last movements, a report came into police of a woman who was seen in the area on Friday evening. The woman was said to have been visibly upset and in tears. The witness statement was made by a couple who were members of the Salvation Army. They saw a woman sitting alone on a bench in Westgate Square. This is a 5-minute walk east of Caxton Place, where Stephanie was due to meet her friends. The witnesses said the woman was visibly distressed and clocked the sighting at 9:30 p.m, a little over an hour after Stephanie was last seen. A sighting also came in from a woman who knew Stephanie, who said she had seen her on the afternoon of Saturday, March 24th. That is the day after she went missing. While these sightings could not be confirmed, the police said they were more positive about the latter sighting on Saturday afternoon. Around a fortnight after Stephanie vanished, it was reported in the South Wales Echo that there were 2 possible sightings of her in the city of Hereford. Hereford is in the west of England and lies just 16 miles, 20 kilometres from the Wales border and just over an hour's drive north of Newport. These were checked out by police, but I can't see that anything came of them. It's an understatement to say it was a very difficult time for Tony and the children. Tony told Wales on Sunday in July 1990 that the first 9 weeks were the worst of his life. 4 months on, he was still finding it incredibly difficult to deal with, but was doing his best to keep it together for the sake of the children. They themselves had found the whole situation extremely upsetting, and extended family members and friends were doing the best they could to support and comfort them. Tony hired a nanny to help with the children, as he had to return to work to provide for the family. As to any explanation for his wife's vanishing, he continued to be perplexed. Stephanie wasn't under any particular stress or strain beyond normal day-to-day stuff. In an interview with the South Wales Echo on June 16, 1990, Tony said if she left willingly for good, he could no longer believe in anything. In another interview with the Wales on Sunday on July 10, 1990, Tony was adamant that if his wife had been involved in what he called another emotional relationship, she would have told him about it. He didn't believe Stephanie had got mixed up with drugs or anything like that, as she always put her children first in everything she did. This left the frightening thought that she had been taken against her will. Nevertheless, in this regard, there continued to be a lack of proof. Detective Alan Watkins, who was working the case, reiterated the police view that there was no evidence of an abduction, though shortly after this, police did say they were keeping an open mind concerning the involvement of another person or persons. 2 alternative explanations were put forward for Stephanie's disappearance. Diana Lamplugh established the Susie Lamplugh Trust after her 25-year-old daughter Susie vanished on July 28, 1987. Susie was an estate agent and was last seen walking away from a house with a man, known only as Mr. Kipper, whom she had arranged to show around the property. Susie has never been seen since and is presumed to have been murdered. Diana Lamplugh commented on Stephanie's case, describing her disappearance as odd, and wondering if she could have had a burnout and experienced a blackout. This could have left Stephanie in a fugue state, unable to remember details about her identity. This was a possibility that Stephanie's husband Tony had also considered. Another theory that was explored by investigators at the time was whether Stephanie had come under the influence of a cult. This idea surfaced because of Stephanie's connection with the spiritualist church, though this angle was swiftly dismissed by police. In the face of different theories and speculation, Detective Chief Inspector William Glynn, who was now leading the inquiry, took the step to say police were working under the assumption that Stephanie was still alive. However, they believed she was no longer in Wales. With so much publicity within Wales, DCI Glynn was convinced Stephanie would have made contact with her family. Eerily, over the previous decade or so, there were several local examples of women who disappeared from the Newport area, with some returning many years later. 35-year-old Christine Ann Lane disappeared in 1985 from Gaia in the southwest of Newport. She turned up again 4 years later in London, asking for a divorce from her husband. Margaret Salter of Queen Street, Newport, had disappeared on 2 previous occasions for long periods of time, before vanishing again in June 1988. This time she left notes behind for her 2 children. I haven't been able to discover if Margaret was ever traced after going missing on this 3rd occasion. There was also the case of 40-year-old Anne Forbes, who disappeared from Newport in 1978. She went by several other names, including Clara or Claire Forbes, Mrs. Hinchcliffe, Mrs. Curtis, and Mrs. Harbin. In 1990, Anne was still missing, and I can't confirm whether or not she was ever found. A significant difference between these women and Stephanie Whittaker was that they all had history of mental illness or relationship issues. This was not the case with Stephanie, and she did not fit the pattern in the slightest. September 1990 saw newspapers begin to reference Stephanie's disappearance, alongside 2 other more recent cases of missing women from Wales. The first was a case I have covered previously on this podcast, and happened just a few months after Stephanie went missing. On Saturday, June 16, 1990, in Llangollen, North Wales, 52-year-old antiques dealer Trevelyan Evans put a sign on the shop door which read, "Back in 2 minutes." She popped across to a local market stall and purchased some fruit for her lunch. Around an hour and a half later, a witness saw Trevelyan walking near her home, a short distance from the shop. There have been no confirmed sightings of Trevelyan since then. The other case concerns a 44-year-old woman, Elizabeth Iris Evans, who went missing on Friday, September 7, 1990. Elizabeth was last seen leaving the solicitor's office where she worked near Jail Hill in Carmarthen, West Wales. As she left for lunch, she told colleagues she was going to visit a friend in a nearby estate and planned to return to the office later that day. Elizabeth did not go back, and inquiries proved that she did not visit the friend. It was not a pre-arranged meeting, and the friend knew nothing about it. Elizabeth was described as 5 foot or 152 centimetres, with short, light brown greying hair. She was last seen wearing a 3/4 length anorak, turquoise blouse, black pleated skirt, black shoes, and carrying a black plastic bag. I can find very little about this incident, and I have been unable to uncover whether Elizabeth is still classed as a missing person. I really hope she was found safe and well. As the first anniversary of Stephanie's disappearance was approaching in March 1991, Tony appeared on the popular weekday morning television show Kilroy to talk about his missing wife. As soon as the segment aired, someone called in to report a sighting of Stephanie in a London pub. While this gave Tony hope, it was always going to be a long shot. Officers from Scotland Yard did investigate the tip, but nothing came of it. At this juncture, Gwent police stated they had not given up on getting to the bottom of the matter. They continued to make requests for Stephanie to get in touch. As an adult, they accepted she had the right to do what she wanted, but asked her to let them know she was safe. Through the media, they assured Stephanie that she would not be required to give away her whereabouts, or forced to return. A few months later, DCI William Glynn was rather more downbeat in his assessment. He now said he was sure Stephanie was dead, though he hoped he would be proven wrong. In truth, there were no new developments, or news either way, concerning what had happened to Stephanie. Almost 4 years later, the case was highlighted on BBC TV's Crime Watch. The feature was originally supposed to air in December 1993, but was pulled at the last minute as producers said there was insufficient time to do the case justice. It was eventually broadcast on January 20th, 1994. Stephanie's case was highlighted after campaigners lobbied the show to cover more missing persons cases. In the past, they had really only been featured when there was good evidence that a murder had been committed. They were now expanding the Crime Watch portfolio to take on cases where murder was suspected, even if there was a lack of hard evidence for this. The strange thing is that I remember the day after this particular episode was aired, as people in school were talking about another case it featured. I may cover that story in a later episode of Persons Unknown. In the Crime Watch episode, Stephanie's story was told very briefly, in just a matter of minutes, with the bare facts of the case highlighted. Police hoped Stephanie or someone who recognised her would get in contact with them, though they added they did fear the worst, implying they thought Stephanie was deceased. To coincide with the Crime Watch episode, DCI Glynn made numerous appeals in the media. Interestingly, he said there may be friends of Stephanie who believe she left voluntarily and were keeping information back. He added they were treating Stephanie's disappearance as extremely suspicious and were very concerned for her welfare. I'm afraid that is really where the trail ends, and Stephanie's story has been seldom mentioned since then. On the website What Do They Know, which facilitates freedom of information requests, I came across an entry concerning Tony Whittaker from March 2024. A freedom of information request was made by an individual to Gwent police, asking if Tony Whittaker was still regarded as a missing person, and if not, whether she was found alive. At the end of April 2024, the reply came that Stephanie was still regarded as a missing person. I also noticed that Stephanie is listed on the website unsolvedmurders.co.uk. I can find no official suspects or persons of interest in the case. What happened to Stephanie on the short walk from her home into Newport town centre remains a mystery. Did she meet someone known to her, or get into a passing car? Did she fall victim to a person like Christopher Halliwell? I've covered Halliwell as a suspect in quite a few of the cases I've covered in previous episodes, so I will not go into him now. Suffice to say, the convicted murderer is often connected to missing or unsolved murdered women in the 1990s. In this instance, I've not read anything that has linked him to this case. There are also the sightings to consider of Stephanie later that day and the following afternoon, but we just can't be sure it was her. What we do know is Stephanie has never attempted to contact her family since March 23, 1990, and there is no record that she has signed on for any state benefits. If you have any information about the disappearance of Tony Whittaker, you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. If you have been affected by someone you know going missing, or if you yourself are thinking of going missing, you can call or text the UK charity Missing People for support on 116 000.